So we're here today to talk to you guys about what happens when we die. It's the question that you've
Pushing
all...
up those daisies.
Pushing up daisies, right? What happens when we die? It's the question that you've all been asking for so long, and honestly, I don't think any of us really know the answer to that question.
No.
What happens when we die?
Because anybody that's already died isn't around to tell us.
And
So,
so we don't really know.
Everybody has their idea of what's going to happen after they die, but they really don't know for sure.
Some of us think we know.
Some of us think we know.
But I don't think any of us really
Our friend
know.
up here is doing a face palm because, we never thought of that.
What happens
when we die?
But all joking aside, this is a serious topic, and I think that what you want to know is what happens to our children who are living with disabilities and who's going to care for them and what's going to happen to them when we're no longer able to care for them. So that's what we're here to talk about. And, I can start out by saying that the plans that we make and the things that we do change constantly depending on circumstances, the needs of the kids.
Everything changes.
Just life changes. The kids get older. Our children are not children anymore. They're young adults and teenagers. And when they were younger, we did have a family designated to become their guardians in the, unlikely event that we would have both died at the same time, during that time. But, they're our age, and it's not, now that's not at all a practical solution.
When we started adopting, we were 40 years old. And so our peer groups were around the same age, had children around the same age as we did. So we had kind of family relationship kind of plans, basically. Other families were going through adoptions at the same time we were, and said, hey, we'll cover for you and you cover for us. And in your home study, when you do an adoption,
you have to name
someone like in the event that something happens to you. So, you think about those kinds of things, but you think about them in the moment of trying to adopt a child.
Things are very different for young children than they are for young adults like we have now. And the other thing too is these plans that people make. I have actually heard of stories where families have designated a family to come in and care for the children, and the worst thing happened and the people backed out. And so these plans, we need to make the plans, but we need to understand that so often it's not very practical. In our case, I think the thing that keeps me awake at night and the thing that I worry about the most is keeping everyone together who wants to stay together. And we'll talk about some of this stuff as we, navigate through this. It's logistical, it's emotional, it's financial, it's very, very personal. And we have kind of put off talking about this for a long time because of that. But we know that you're curious, and we hope that anything that we've learned and that we can share with you will help other young families coming up. We didn't know a lot of things.
Right. And let it be known too that although there's a lot of folks out there, everybody thinks that they can plan for all these kinds of things, and
all the contingencies.
If all the contingencies. If A happens, then we're going to set up in motion B, C, D, E. Or if 2 happens, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 are going to happen. And so as much planning as you can do, that's all great. But you know what? 9 times out of 10, those plans are not going to be exercised because there's too many variables of what happens.
Man plans, God laughs. Yeah. That's the saying.
So it doesn't mean that you don't plan.
You have
because
to. It's irresponsible not to.
For certain kinds of things, and you have to plan for the most likely events or the most risky events, and then try to accommodate those things. But it's difficult a lot of times to look 5, 10, 20 years down the road and anticipate what's going to happen, because truly none of us know
what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes or the next day. And when things, life situations come up, they usually do come up and overtake you quickly and without notice oftentimes. But at any rate, for those of you who are new to our channel, we'd like to welcome you and thank you for subscribing and being here with us. And you may not know, those of you who are new, that Joe has been back to work for 2 years. He had lost his professional job. He was out of work for 6 years. And
Yep.
when you think about that, guys, 6 years, we're not talking 6 weeks or 6 months. We're talking
Right.
6 years of being out of work.
Right.
And during that time, we lost a lot of ground. We basically lost all the money
Everything.
that we had saved, and we had to live on it and
Right.
tried to start a business and that sort of thing. And, we're not going to get into a lot of details, but
Right. It's one of those things too that you do think that you're going to get hired right away again,
Right.
and the best wisdom says you got to have 3 months or 6 months salary in the bank in case something happens. And in our case, we had more than that. We had enough in savings, and we had kept enough to basically keep everything going for about 18 months. But by 18 months, guess what? It's all gone. And then what do you do?
We
And
never in a million years
with no
expected.
prospects at the time
Right.
of getting regular employment again. And that had happened so many times. So we did start our own business and got things going again, but it's nothing like having full-time employment, insurance, a retirement plan, all the kind of 401k and savings and all the kind of things that people take for granted. And we are a single income family.
Always
So
have been.
mom left her career when we got married to stay at home and have a large family. And
and you had a son when we
I
got
did
married.
have a son, right?
And so
So we had Joel right away, and then we went 10 years without having any more kids, and so much for our large family. So our trek for adoption started when we were 40. And so we were already at an age when I got laid off around 50, 52, something like that, you're at the kind of peak and the highlight of your career. And so in those cases, I no longer had the ability to have life insurance at work, for example, or health insurance at work. And one of the things over those few years, we realized that we had to, with no income essentially coming in, no regular income coming in, that we had to reach out to our agencies and our social
Right.
circles
that was my
around.
point. That was the blessing
to-
in disguise of you being out of work. Because up until that point, we had been very self-sufficient,
Right.
and we hadn't realized that a lot of these benefits and services and things were available to our children in the here and now. It's not, a lot of the stuff that we discovered is not even income-based at all.
When the kids are young, under 18, they are income
In
based.
Virginia.
So we found that in that dire situation where we didn't have regular income coming in, that we all of a sudden, after many months of waiting lists and those kinds of things, that our kids did get some benefits because they were income based for the family. And we tapped into
did.
some resources
We're
from
lucky
the
to
state
still
and
have our
county.
home, actually.
And then and we did get our health insurance through healthcare.gov, and we went through several insurance plans to get the right ones, but we had to pay for it. And so we went
had
through that.
little things like, well, they're not so little in our home, but things like feeding supplies, like the nutritional drinks for a kid with eating disorders, and diapers for someone who's been diagnosed with incontinence. These things are paid for by insurance, and we hadn't even been aware of that.
And they're typically
So-
covered by Medicaid, but typically not covered by regular insurance. So in those cases, you get, we were getting our diapers for 2 of our kids, and for
We had paid
some
for everything
nutritional
up until
supplements as part of Medicaid,
Which
So
helped
we're
us
very,
a
very,
lot
very
during that
thankful.
time. But the most important thing that we did during that time is we got the kids, we found out about the Medicaid waivers. The Medicaid waivers are something that when you have a child with a disability, or some of you that have, older children or adults or anyone, you want to sign up and get on the waiting list for the Medicaid waiver. Because the Medicaid waiver, it will enable you to have like personal care attendants, respite care. It, for some of our kids, it provides for housing for the future in the, event that something were to happen to us.
Right.
And so those things, it's very, very important to be on the radar of your Department of Social Services, the people in your community that are aware of the situation and can step in, if something happens. And to be practical at this point in time, before I forget this point, I do want to say that the single most important thing we can do for our kids, for their future, once we're gone, is to teach them to be as independent as they can possibly be.
Right.
And if that just means Obed feeding himself, if that means Jessie just being able to communicate and find her way around the house, and sometimes the more advanced things, the domestic life skills like laundry and cooking
Brushing
and banking, brushing their own teeth, anything we can teach these kids to do to be independent is going to make their lives better. Because what will happen now that they're young adults and teenagers is this Medicaid waiver services will step in, and the kids there will be someone to oversee their care. Now, Jessie,
whether or not we pick that person or
well,
not.
yeah, we won't have anything to say about that because we'll be dead.
We'll be
So, there's
Right.
that. But that's what we're talking about today, right? But
when our visitor comes?
when our visitor comes, whoever that is, I don't know, this person lurking in the shadows over here.
Poke the lurker.
The lurker poking in the shadows over here. But whenever that,
You need to come closer.
person comes to pay the visit, not anytime soon, hopefully,
What's that you got there? You gotta.
to harvest his
So David is helping us today,
playing a role in
playing
this
the
video.
role of the Grim Reaper, because someday the Grim Reaper will.
Well, something that we have,
Get out of here, Grim
Yeah,
Reaper.
see ya,
for now.
Grim- we're
See
not
ya.
ready
We're
for
not
you
ready
yet.
for you yet. Go
we're
away.
we're old, but we're young.
That's right.
We've
We
got
have to
a lot,
stay
lot
young.
of
We have a
time.
lot more life left,
Where was I?
God willing.
Yeah,
So we're talking
you
about
don't-
waivers. Waivers too depend on. There's a lot of different kinds of waivers. They all depend on disability, types
the
of disability.
needs of the individual.
For example, some things like intellectual disabilities and autism have waivers for those. Blindness in itself has some waiver capability, but there's issues with just blindness.
Well, the Medicaid waiver is mostly for people with intellectual
That's right.
disabilities, and
The point being, if someone only has a blindness waiver,
they don't qualify.
they
Our
don't
friend the Grim
qualify.
Reaper over there, he does not qualify for Medicaid
No,
waiver
he doesn't,
services.
because blindness by itself is not and the waiver conditions doesn't require full-time
No.
caregiving, right? Because
So-
there's many independent people, as we all know. There's some on YouTube that are completely independent in their life. They just need a little bit of help with their blindness.
our
but they don't need
case,
life
we
support
have-
skills.
2 of our kids are completely and totally dependent on us for everything.
Personal care.
And those 2 kids, Jessie and Obed, already have their waiver.
Yeah.
The 3 girls, Abby, Bethany, and Hannah, are all on the waiting list. The 3 girls do qualify for companion services, and they also qualify for housing. Even Hannah, she's a very intelligent, independent, bright young lady
Who has a job.
and these are job training, and all that is very important. It goes with training for independence. She has a processing disability that goes along with being on the autism spectrum. And that processing disability makes it so she really does need to have someone live with her and just help her make proper decisions and look after her. And
Right. Otherwise known as guardianship.
guardianship.
So we have guardianship.
Which we have guardianship now, but when the day comes when
Someone else
will
have to
be
take over
appointed.
guardianship.
The other thing we have, the Medicaid waivers and that sort of thing, that's a very important governmental community oversight. But we also have a lot of unknowns. We don't know who of our children will end up in relationships.
Right.
I fully expect that David will be married and have a family. We don't know
Right.
who he might marry, but his wife may want to see to the oversight and care of the kids. We have Joel is not yet married. He's our older son who's 32. Single girls, anybody who's interested. I just have to put that plug in there, not wanting to, speak for Joel or anything, but he's not married now and would like to be. And so we don't know,
Right.
if his wife might be interested in having these kids live with them or not. But at any rate, they can certainly, they're not expected to do that, but they can certainly see to the oversight and management of all of the financial stuff, and make sure that the right people are here and that sort of thing. One thing we learned very recently, for those of you who have IEPs in place for your children, there's that little clause, the least restrictive environment. And what we have learned just in the past few weeks is that the community looks to, if something were to happen to me and Joe, they look at the children's living situation and they're going to approach that from the least restrictive environment consideration. In this case, with our kids, since there's so many of them, the thing that they would do is stay in their own home. If they could, if it was possible. If they can, barring any unforeseen circumstances that come from the future, we do need to own our own home. That's something that we do own this home, and we still have a lot of things from our unemployment years that we're working on, and a lot of things still at risk, but we're not going to get into a lot of those details, but we are working through things that are very difficult behind the scenes, but we don't have to live here, but we do need to own our own home, because in that event,
security and the stability and the location
and ownership,
right?
So that they could stay, and they would treat our home as a group home environment, right. And there's a process for applying.
Right, there's processes, and we've thought about these processes over the last few years, mm-hmm. And part of that process is, and it's one of the reasons why we have our foundation, the Amazing Families Foundation, because we started this foundation with the idea there's a lot of things like living trusts and other kinds of things that people can set up for their kids so that they can have resources when they're ongoing.
You might want to explain some of that.
Well, in our situation, we needed to have, and it would be a good idea if we were going to be spending a lot of time working with our kids and others to help them get employment.
Job training. Huge.
What we found when we were trying to find work for Hannah, for example, those kind of supported employment services are very few and far between. Mm-hmm. And we found that many families had to do and create their own nonprofit.
That's how Cameron's got started, where Hannah works. It's their daughter, enjoyed cooking and baking, and they started that business so that their daughter and others in the community could have jobs.
Right. So we started Amazing Families Foundation at amazingfamilies.org for that purpose, and to do job training and help employment opportunities for those with disabilities, not just physical disabilities like blindness, but also intellectual and developmental opportunities as well.
Our foundation is in its infancy stages. We're we're terrible at self-promotion or promoting of our own things, and that's in the very early stages.
But the next step past employment is community living accommodations. Now if someone is wealthy and they have a child that has disabilities, there are plans and programs. There are some nonprofits that are set up so that a family member, for example, can set up a trust to purchase part of a condominium for their child, for their adult child.
Ownership is very important.
So they can buy a part of a group home as part of a community as a nonprofit, and that's part of this residential program that people are looking at. But if you're not wealthy and your child is not, if the family's not able to do this, the community has to, and the nonprofits have to do it and have to rise up and be accountable to this, because the county itself or the state, they're stretched to the limit on what they're able to do.
We do have faith to believe that everything's going to work out just fine. We believe that, if Abby could be found, and you can look at our adoption videos here to hear that story if you don't know it already, but I mean, she had been left in a trash can at age 11 months, and the way we look at it is if she could be found under those circumstances with the conditions that she has and survive and thrive and find her way home all the way to in another country, we believe that God watches out for these kids. And we'll continue to do that whether we're here or not. We believe that this is our assignment while we're here on this earth, and our plan is to take care of our kids for as long as we possibly can, until we, until we just can't anymore. And and the other thing too is it's very unlikely that we would both be gone at the same time. So the scenario is typically that one parent is left to care for the kids. And, in your case, I mean, now that you've dieted and you've been working out and you've gotten yourself all healthy.
Trying to,
you just got
I had to do that.
A nice life insurance policy.
Again, I wasn't able to get insurance at work because I didn't have any. Because I didn't have, I was self-employed.
Well, you have some at work now.
When I did get my job, but they only limit it to
it's not
one or two times the annual salary or whatever. It doesn't really do much for the rest of the situation. So I've now been able to purchase a life insurance policy for myself.
That's adequate.
That is adequate to keep things going in that event, or just to keep things stable,
so that we would have
we can
time.
Make a decision, and the kids, there's time to, there's no panic if something were to happen, something were to happen to me.
And if I were to go first, I mean, you would have.
I'd be in deep trouble.
You'd be in deeper doo-doo than you think you would.
God,
I tell you what, you guys, okay, if that happens, make sure that you tell him to hire a housekeeper.
Yeah, there you go.
And somebody who can cook the meals, and you know what I'm saying, because now you can look after the kids, but you're going to need some help if that happens. Right. I mean, all you can do is laugh. What are we going to do? We're going to laugh about this. Hold it straight.
Who's that? Come in here to...
Our blind Grim Reaper can't even figure out how to hold his tombstone.
It's pretty sad.
David, you make a really good Grim Reaper.
Yeah, he does. He's scary looking.
This time of year is a good time to do a video like this.
Yeah.
You forgot your flowers.
Here, come over there and do that.
Hey, wait a minute.
Go closer.
No, it's not time yet.
It's not time yet. Okay, so about the waivers, how long were our kids on the waiver list? And how long have they been on it?
Okay, well, our kids were not on the list for very long, Jesse and Obed, because their needs are so significant, and they were older. But I would recommend, if you're not on that Medicaid waiver waiting list, you should go to your local community services board and get on the waiting list, because some people wait for years. So this is all U.S. stuff. Some people wait for years and years and years. Now, our girls, Abby, Bethany, and Hannah, have been on the waiting list for several years, and they will continue to remain on the waiting list for several years because they don't have an immediate need for care, full-time care. Even now, Abby will be the next one to get the waiver, but even that will be a while. And at this point in time, while we're still here caring for them, they basically qualify for companion services so that they can access things out in the community more easily without being dependent on us. And Hannah gets her support through DARS.
Right.
through the Department of Aging and Rehabilitation Services.
Which is another thing. Depending on your disability, the agency that is responsible for you is different. For example,
When you have multiple disabilities, like our kids, the Department for the Blind will come in and provide equipment and things like that, except in a case like Hannah, where there are multiple disabilities, the Department for the Blind isn't going to do really anything to help. I mean, they'll provide,
Equipment.
orientation and mobility skills when needed,
Right.
but
And
the
adaptive
case
equipment.
is closed and the case is open and the case is closed and the case is open and, as needed. But the job coaches and things all come through
Right.
the Department of Aging and
rehabilitation, which is a state agency. They're funded typically by the federal government, but the state agency takes care of that. The state also, through those rehabilitative services agencies, takes care of the living arrangements and occupational needs and things like that. And and that's for intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, and physical disabilities. So they arrange and are part of that. One of the agencies that helps, we haven't done a lot with, but that we probably are going to in the future, is the ARC. So the ARC is a nonprofit organization that has chapters all over the United States, and the ARC is typically very helpful in getting a person connected with the agencies that are responsible for
And
their
they
particular
can become, if I'm not mistaken, they can become
a guardian of
the guardian of
called
the
the-
individual.
It's called the guardian of last resort. So in the event that there's no one to take care of that individual
And
who
let's
needs
be honest,
help,
guys.
who needs help,
or
who needs
anyone
help,
who's. I mean, Joe and I don't know anyone really who would be willing to do that. I mean, I think that Joel and David would look after the administrative aspect, but we can't.
guardianship is something that really important.
Depend, on that
Right.
or expect that from them at all.
So an agency like the ARC or others can become a guardian of last resort, and it's not like it's the last thing. The point is that that individual who needs that support doesn't get left hanging, and it's an individual who's certified to be a counselor and
They're
to
not
take
going to be
care of-
left homeless.
They're not going to be left, and they're going to be cared for and not
they're gonna be
abused,
cared for and
looking out for the best of their needs. So. They have people on staff that do that kind of
Stuff
of
worries
thing.
me. It does. It keeps me awake at
But
night.
do people even know about it? We didn't. We didn't know about much
There's
of
a lot of
this.
things, and I don't want you guys to think for 1 minute that we're experts at
And
anything.
we don't know any of
because
this.
we're not. We're learning as we go along, just like everybody else in our situation. Now we have, multiple. I mean, we've got 6 instead of 1 or 2.
Right.
It's very unusual to have, this
Now-
many. So our desire is to have all 6 of our kids, or as many as want to stay together, be able to stay together.
Right.
And
And when we bought this house 12 years ago, 13 years ago, we thought that this would be their last place and that they would want to keep this as our family home.
And we hope that can
so
still happen.
we traded some land that we had on our last property for more space in the house, which this one has. So this has enough room for live-in help if we need it eventually,
And a house full of adults.
and a house full of adults with
And like
you
I
know,
said,
so
I mean, we
God
don't know
willing,
what
if
the
we keep it.
relationships or whatever. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen or who's going to come into your life or who's going to go out of your life or, what sort of circumstances will happen. It's an evolving process. And the moral of the story is you spend, at least we do, most of our energy just trying to survive each day and live life in the moment and cherish each day for the gift that it is. And so that's where we're at.
So
We know
what
that
happens
day's
when you
coming.
die? We don't know.
We don't have a clue.
But hopefully with some thoughts and prayers and
planning as best you can, as
that-
much as we can.
our kids will be, we're trying to get them as independent as possible, that they'll be able to work and live independendly, should that be the best course for them. And hopefully they'll be able to live together, and
If they want to.
but more details to come about the foundation and some of the things we're going to be doing with that, and helping not only our kids but some other kids as well. So
Not going anywhere anytime soon.
Nope.
Lord willing.
No pushing up daisies here.
Lord
this
willing.
guy. But anyway, we love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope that answered your questions. If it didn't, put a comment down below and maybe we'll do another. This has been a most requested video for sure of most of our comments, and people always say, I don't want to be rude, but what happens when you die? And it's like, well, if anyone knew that.
Here's the thing. When we adopted these children, we were more concerned about what was going to happen to them when they lived.
Yeah.
We weren't thinking about what was going to happen to them when we died.
Right.
We were concerned about them, and we still are, what's going to happen to them while they live. And they have a pretty good life, and we have a pretty good life with them. And so we're just gonna keep on keeping on here.
All right. Let's do that.